Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. Everything is out of scale once again on my OBS, which is a consistent problem of it just like not keeping the orientation right. I'm hoping everything else is right though, so I think I'll just ignore that. And we'll run into some other out of scale issues for today too. So I realized I've been doing something very stupid. There's probably at least a short list of things that I've been doing stupid as far as my YouTube channel, and certainly at the top of that could be not making content and not scheduling content, although there is almost an argument to say, hey, after Labor Day, or maybe we would just say after the end of August, no new videos will be scheduled until January. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but that is what TV does. Certainly, it is just all reruns and no new shows during the time that people are in school. Kids are in school, although I'm not really targeting kids anyway, so like people who work jobs year round usually. But yeah, there has always been this kind of smaller number of views during a certain period of time. I don't think it really is September though. If anything, I should say take a break and not schedule anything for like January and February, the first quarter of the year. If I was going to do that, as far as just pre-recorded footage is all I'm speaking about right now though. I'm not talking about live streams or YouTube shorts. Those would keep going. But yeah, there is kind of this consistent history that I now have had over the past few years of finding spots where I'm just out of momentum and I've fallen behind as far as making content. So yeah, that certainly is a thought. Of course, that's not what I was actually going to talk about. That was a sidebar. I have not been consistently waiting for the notification to come out from YouTube when these live streams are going to happen. And if I'm not getting the notifications, or if I'm starting to stream before I even get the notifications, then clearly nobody else is getting the notifications. So I'm hurting myself. And last stream may have proven that in a small part, or it may have just been a fluke, but my watch time last stream was like 2 minutes and 48 seconds when my watch time normally is like 19 seconds. It's ridiculous. Certainly, but it's a small amount, but they are averaging people who just jump into the streams and then immediately jump out, which I can't help but think that there are a lot of either real world people like that or bots that are like that jump into things. Certainly that would be one way to hurt competitors, although I don't think we really need to be a crab in the bucket type society on YouTube where we're trying to hurt other YouTube content creators channels. But yeah, one way certainly would be to have bots just look at your video for a second, then stop watching, bringing down the average watch time. But yeah, I can't affect any of that. What I can affect though is to make sure the notification comes out, and I certainly can do the actions necessary to start the notification coming out a lot earlier. By the time I start my macros, which took incredibly long amount of time today, had I started the process of the notification coming out before starting the macro, it definitely would have been out before the macro was done. So yeah, I'm gonna need to be better and do things the right way to give myself actually a chance. This is to talk about actual video games. The first sample day that I've streamed in probably a week or two, in which Black Myth Wukong's 24-hour peak concurrent has fallen below Counter-Strike 2. It's still massively high. It's still very much getting, I assume, a major bump from just being very Chinese, popular in China, I guess is the best way to say that. That being said, since it is, I've heard people describe it as a boss rush game, I can't help but think that you are going to have a level of saturation there, in that even the players who are big and excited on it are reaching an end point where there's just not really going to be a lot more content to play on Black Myth Wukong. It's going to be kind of crazy if you play the boss rush game over and over again, unless you're trying to speedrun it, which we probably will see some speedruns. But it certainly just doesn't have that same staying power that an esports player versus player online game like Counter-Strike 2 is going to have, or even other types of single player games that might have some more replayability, roguelikes, for example. Of course, sticking power also, I think, heavily is affected by just, can you get a lot of people to run bots? I imagine that is why Banana is still in the number 4 spot, is that bots have just been set up and forgotten about, and there's very little reason to turn off a bot or even remember you set up a bot once you started one. If anything, it might be the best comparison to say, look at something like Naraka Blade Point, which is not what this trailer is actually showing me. Was there some kind of Lara Croft crossover event with Naraka Blade Point? I guess there was. Interesting, they really are licensing out Lara Croft all over the place, aren't they? But yeah, the more Asian or traditional Asian storytelling and visuals and just theming a game has may directly compare to other Asian games, whereas you're not in the mind, a Westerner is not in their mind at least likely to compare something like Counter-Strike 2 to even Dota 2, or definitely not Banana. So there might be only enough room for Westerners to be interested in one Asian game at most. Deadlock has made it to the top 10 spot. This is all SteamDB. Meanwhile, I still don't think you can actually get into the game. So they seem to be just slowly giving out more and more invites to the beta. It is still kind of questionable whether some drastic things might change when the game actually gets released. Baldur's Gate 3 is down to 18. Elden Ring is in the 20th spot. Do we have anything else? Overwatch 2 is in the 29th spot. Dead by Daylight in the 30th spot. I don't know if there's going to be anything else of major difference here. We're still kind of coming off of the Labor Day weekend this Wednesday in the West, in the United States at least. So things are mostly slow. Cookie Clicker. This is a game that I don't feel like has been in the top 100 for a very long time. So has there been some kind of new update to Cookie Clicker? Let's open that and see. Or is this a case that kids are getting back into school and that's why we're seeing like Bloons Tower Defense 6 and Cookie Clicker? These are inherently games I could see kids telling other kids to go check out and play, bringing them back up to popularity. And yeah, if kids are back in school, theoretically, depending on how monitored their computer access is, they might have more access to games and stronger PCs that can play games. Windows 11 has, for the first time I think, beaten Windows 10 or as far as the most used operating system on Steam, which, yeah, August 28th, 7 days ago. There is some new record update. Let's see if there's anything new. There's no user update mentioned here, though. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why you'd see a boost there. But yeah, we may just be back into a season in which people play more games, which would be directly opposite of the thought of not making footage and putting it out right now. Yeah, it's probably pretty stupid to take a break now. It'd be a lot smarter to take a break in maybe February. I almost want to do like a game of the year thing in January, but I don't know how I'd really do that. So as far as my chart goes, though, this is not, I bet, updated. Let me reload and see if there's a new color. Something is wrong here. Black Myth Wukong should not have full 100s. It should have a 99 in its spot. Ooh, so am I reading this wrong? I think I am. Interesting. So yeah, I don't even know how my own chart works, apparently. Apparently every time it reloads, it's putting the newest sample at the bottom. Because Counter-Strike 2 has been in the second spot, so it should be full of 99 points in each of the spots here. Except for today that it was in the first spot, so it should be 100. So yes, it very much is the case that this is the oldest sample side, I have to assume. And maybe I should put something on the side here to label that better. If I'm not understanding it clearly, other people won't understand it. So yeah, you can just ignore all the other colors on the colored stacked bar graph to get the bar graph of that day's sample, which inherently Deadlock has a big bump today, but has not averaged high enough in its samples before to get higher overall. Yeah. And we're noticeably seeing Euro Truck Simulator has fallen out of favor, and Farming Simulator has fallen out of favor. Those are two simulator games that are fairly popular in Europe, so I would assume there's probably similar reasons why they've fallen out of favor. Path of Exile seems oddly a little lower, so maybe it's gotten a little bit of a bump. But yeah, this does seem like this bar chart needs some more tweaks, but it's doing fairly good at what we're trying to do. Now, as for the catch-up section, as far as what I've done in the past couple of days, very little of it has been video game related, although I did go through some of my follow list and do some cleanup. Quite a lot of games that I put on the follow list through making the YouTube shorts just disappear from Steam. And so yeah, just going through all the letter A's, which was like 300 links alone, so I'm looking at 26 times 300 links overall to do a manual file list cleanup before I even can get the macro to start working for me. Yeah, quite a few of the games that I make YouTube shorts on just disappear. There's still a lot of games that are to be announced, and I think that there is definitely an argument to find a point at some point in the year, whether that's in December or January or February, to just say, hey, if a game hasn't been announced by December is probably your best bet. It's probably time to just drop that from the fall list too. I have to do everything and anything possible to keep the fall list as small as possible so it's manageable, and Steam's web server can actually handle the size of the fall list. To my own devices, I could probably handle the size pretty easily, but their web server is just not designed to have that many games. It's designed to have like 10 games on the fall list, not whatever 300 times 26 would be, somewhere around 8 to 10,000, I would say. Steam has yet another fest going on, the Space Exploration Fest, which is a theme that gets done quite a bit. Otherwise, as far as non-video game stuff I am doing, I am building up my server rack, and it is just taking forever. I got a monitor mount. Inherently in server racks, you'll run into this problem. Either you're going to pay a ridiculous amount of money for slightly smaller 19-inch monitors and keyboards and mouse that have to fit between the 19-inch standard width of a server rack. And yeah, you're going to pay like $600 for a monitor that really should cost about $150 if you do that. Or I was able to find a mount that will put the monitor slightly in front of the rack, and then you can get a more standard 22-inch monitor with a fairly thick bezel. Like the monitor I'm using is a very old refurbished one from probably 15 years ago. And it fits fairly well. The problem with all of these rack mount pieces of metal that you attach to the rack is they come with minimal to no instructions. A lot of times they might not come with the rack clips to mount them to the rack, which is its own weird system. And so yeah, there's just a lot of time, a lot of lifting. The monitor I'm using is very old. Casting of Frank Stone has mixed reviews. Interesting. Because it's old, it's very heavy, whereas otherwise it would have been way easier to put a modern 22-inch monitor, and that's something I would want to do at some point. Warhammer 40k Space Marine in the #1 sales spot. Interesting. I want to get a KVM switch, which is supposed to be keyboard. I think it's keyboard, video, and mouse is what it stands for. Where you have one keyboard and it connects to multiple computers, one monitor, and it connects to multiple computers, and one mouse. Although the mouse is inherently almost always USB these days, so it really is KVU at this point, and you probably should have 2 or 3 USB plugs that you would want to use for a server rack. And at this point, 4K compatible KVMs with HDMI connectors does make sense, since my 2 servers do have way too powerful video cards in them that are leftovers from previous computer builds. They are all hand-me-down computers, whereas a proper server computer would be its own custom equipment and wouldn't have super powerful video cards, for gaming video cards in them at least. But it still probably would have HDMI output nobody's going to use VGA in our DVI connections as far as the video outputs anymore. Yeah, right now I'm definitely just moving a lot of furniture, assembling furniture, trying my best. Where did that... Why are the links I'm opening like 2 tabs to the right of the most leftmost tabs? But yeah, putting it, I kind of knew this was going to happen, but even at this, I'm really running into a booby trap here in that buying a rack that was cheap has required me now to buy a bunch of accessories for the rack to just maintain its stability physically so it doesn't fall over or crumple on itself. And so spending, I hope I only spent $300 on the rack, is going to pretty much push me to spend probably another $300 just on accessories. There were accessories I was going to get eventually, but, and that's not even the big stuff. Like, you easily spend $600 putting battery backup in it. I'm not even going to begin to think I'm going to do that right now. Putting in a switch is potentially $200, $250, depending on how big of a switch. But if you're going to get a rack mount switch, it's going to have to be a certain size. You can go crazy with patch panels. I don't think for a home lab patch panels make sense. I question if patch panels make sense even in most network buildups. There's a difference between it being in a facility where you're pulling out servers and switches all the time and replacing them, which I'm not sure that even that happens in an often enough case to justify patch panels, when you can instead just directly plug network cords into switches. In any other form of connectors, it's crazy to have a in terminator on a wire, which would be your little network plastic plug, the plastic piece on the end of your network cord. It would be crazy to have one of those terminators plug into a adapter, which is what your patch panel is, to then let you plug in a different cord with another plastic adapter, another terminator, to then make a slightly shorter run to the other side to have yet another plastic in terminator to plug into the actual computer. I mean, it's just crazy. You're just adding extra components, and that only makes sense if you're switching things out on a near quarterly basis or more often. A home lab, you don't have to do that. Instead, what you want to do, in my opinion, is they have these brush through hole face plates that are relatively very cheap for rack mounts. You just pull the cord through the back to the front where your switch is going to be, or better yet, you put the switch, if you have a rack mount that lets you mount things from the back and front, you put the switch on the back instead of the front, and then you connect everything that way. That works very nicely at that point. But yeah, compare that to something like cable TV, where you're losing 3 decibels every time you connect any kind of terminator or adapter, borehole things. Like, you would lose signal like crazy. I guess you just don't do it that much on twisted pair network cords for them to care about that. But yeah, and you don't do it either for, you really don't want to even do that for fiber, which is how newer setups would probably be, although probably not as much as you would think. There still probably is a lot of Cat 5, Cat 6, Cat maybe 7 networking going on. A big part of the way, this has nothing to do with video games, I have just remembered, but a big part of the way I think network setups are designed is to waste corporations' budget and money. And since some corporation is paying some contractor, nobody really cares, except for all the underpaid employees of that corporation who could have used that money as a Christmas bonus instead. Yeah, I'm kind of rambling, but that's what I've been doing, is building out a rack mount server physically. It'll probably be a very long time before I actually build out any of the software so it actually works, or have it in any kind of position where it actually is doing anything. It has been like a 10-year plus project where I've just been focusing on making YouTube content instead. And choices were made, and at least the YouTube content had a chance of being useful or productive or financially beneficial, possibly, whereas the home lab is almost certainly more of a money waste. So let's get back to video game news, since we're mentioning money waste here. In the Kingdom Hearts Integrum Masterpiece is on sale for $69, which, considering how you're getting 3 Kingdom Hearts games in their latest versions, which probably is closer to an integration of 9 Kingdom Hearts games, not a bad deal. Not a bad deal at all. Although it is also a game that I wouldn't play. It is more of a thing where, do I want to spend $70 in the hopes that my nieces and nephews might want to play this game because it has Disney in it, which is believable, but also in the hopes that family sharing is enabled, which we can check that, and it does say family sharing is here. It's kind of crazy you have to check that, but that family sharing would really work. Let's click on family sharing and just see where that takes us. It just takes us to a search of games that have family sharing. It does not actually explain what family sharing is, which you'd think maybe there should be a little question mark there as far as, hey, can you explain what Steam Cloud and Steam Achievements and single player just have a little question mark that pops up if you hover on it. So yeah, that's a thought. It's a thought I probably really should wait on. 31% for a Square Enix game might be a good deal. 31%, particularly for Kingdom Hearts, since Disney is also involved, might be a great deal. But also, I would say I wouldn't be surprised if it goes down a little bit more. Certainly isn't coming up like a slick deal. Yeah. The Space Exploration Fest has several games, which, yeah, not sure which ones of these I particularly would want to play. A couple of these I played on a different account, so FTL, I don't think I would want to ever go back and play that, and Kerbal Space Program, don't think I'd ever want to go back and play that, but owning them, again, nieces and nephews. Outer Worlds might be the biggest one to pick, and it's funny how Warhammer is being added in here. I saw that there is a yet another mod for not No Man's Sky, but it's not even listed here. The Bethesda space game, Starfield, that tries to add the whole Star Wars theming to Starfield. So play Star Wars instead of Starfield using the Starfield engine, which to my mind is just yet another example of how too many people keep making mods for game systems and games engines just because it might be easier to make mods for those systems and those engines instead of making their own game. Whereas, yeah, if you were going to make a fan mod that was a Star Wars parody, then making it in something like the Unreal Engine would, or the Unreal Engine would probably be the right move. They're giving away some free point items stuff here. This is all fairly pointless, although as far as themes go, I don't hate space, so some of this is probably worth pointing out, though, that there is things here that have not updated with the Steam Deck at all. It just seems like crazy to spend 5,000 points, even though you have a ton of them, on things that I'd barely ever use. Yeah, as far as startup movies, that was what I was thinking in particular. The thing that would take the most amount of loading. I still do feel like all of this really should just be free. There's been a few movies been added here, but I bought just like every single startup movie when I got to Steam Deck. And that was a few months ago. There's only 4 or 5, 6, 7. Yeah, it seems like there's been 7 new movies that have been added. These keyboards I think I skipped because I don't think I would have ever used them. Again, these should just be free. And then I imagine avatars have gotten some new things, but maybe not that much. It may very well be the case that this, and this are the only new avatars that have been added. Couldn't tell you as far as avatar frames. Can you just buy community awards? Apparently not. That would be weird. Can you buy seasonal badges? Apparently you can. I'm not sure what a seasonal badge really does. This all just screams a lot of horse armor nonsense at this point. A lot of... We're giving you basically nothing with these Steam points, and you can purchase nothing with them. These are mostly things and items that would have been free. You would have either gotten them by making badges, which I guess they're moving away from making badges, is pretty obvious. Or you would have just got them for free for playing the game. I guess perhaps the pushback here is that they are forcing game developers to not try and sell this junk. That might be the one positive twist you could put on it, is that we've seen less of an attempt to try and sell it for actual real world money. Although you're really only getting Steam points by buying games, so you effectively are only getting it by spending real world money. There's no other way to earn Steam points, store points, whatever they're called. I wouldn't be surprised if there's either right now or at some point in the future a split in which the actual Steam marketplace, where you can sell trading cards and game items for actual currency that can be used to buy games, gets banned in some, if not a lot, of countries around the world, and then the only store that is allowed to stay up is these tickets have no actual value storefront that we just looked at. And that might be the whole idea, is that they're just hedging their bets by having 2 stores and focusing on the worthless one. Moving on, as far as video game news, this is not technically Video Games Chronicles. This one is Gematsu, the Indie Live Expo set for December 7th. Which, yeah. I did some more tweaking, and there is potentially room where I might need to do some more tweaking. The Risk of Rain studio has stopped work on a new game as key talent has joined Valve. Oppo Games co-founder and many other team members are now working at the Half-Life maker, which, frankly, in any other company you could speculate, well, does that mean Valve is now working on some kind of game that is similar to Risk of Rain? I don't know if you really can take too much from that, because the history may have been at one time that a bunch of students were hired out of Digipin's college to make Portal 1, but I think the majority of the students that were hired by Valve to make Portal 1, for the most part, maybe there's like one person that still works at Valve and really hasn't done anything, so it hurt their career, in my personal opinion, probably terribly, by being hired by Valve and staying with Valve. I imagine maybe some of the other people who worked on it maybe have found some careers where they're mid-tier or low-level programmers. But then you look at, say, the Firewatch team that was acquired more recently by Valve, and they, as far as I recall, have not released anything or done anything. And so my theory would be to lean towards the case that these team members are going to work at Valve, and maybe they'll be working on a game, but maybe they'll just be working on Steam. Valve is potentially a very nice place to work if you don't want to have anything on your bibliography, but it's a terrible place if you want to make a name for yourself or do great things or actually release games at all. It has been a long process, and maybe things are starting to change at Valve, but it definitely has been a long history of people going to work for Valve and then never being heard of again. And that would be my guess. Sure, I definitely could be wrong, and we may see something like Risk of Rain, some game like that, being developed by Valve. We may also just see these team members being put into roles to make Deadlock more of a thing. They may be secretly working on Half-Life 3, if that ever actually appears. But yeah, Valve is about the worst company to speculate on of all the companies anyways, because the fact that they're sitting on a pile of money and they uniquely don't even have the same pressures that Nintendo has, where Nintendo theoretically is also sitting on a pile of money, but really has a social pressure to continuously make more games for their consoles and make more Mario and Nintendo games in general. Yeah, I'm gonna question which of these articles as we go through it, as a side note, to see if the font is good enough, if it's big enough. I think one of the things on the custom style sheet, and I won't talk too much about the custom style sheets today, is there is like a REM, which I assume is relative EM, but I don't know what EM stands for, so I need to figure out what EM is as far as setting the font values that way, because ideally I want the font to get bigger or smaller based on the width of the screen. I want it to shrink itself a little bit to make it one line, or make it bigger if it's falling short and the headline stops right about here. And then I would want this to automatically adjust the image to fit. Yep. just dynamic sizing all over the place. Which I guess dynamic sizing really is more difficult than it would seem, since it's taken many systems, not just HTML, decades to get to the point where dynamic sizing even starts to make sense. The Mortal Kombat 1 Chaos Reigns expansion trailer shows off sector gameplay. This is another one that doesn't seem to have an image at the top. And these Video Games Chronicle articles also just do not have they just do not have any. What was I gonna say? I lost my train of thought. I was gonna say they have a lot of ads popping up, like just a ton of ads trying to pop up according to uBlock Origin. Just reloading this page, it says 22 ads and elements have already been blocked, and then it just seems to cycle in new ads, or try to at least. Again, this is a case where the font is not it's not big enough to make it stand out from the rest of the article, so there probably needs to be something adjusted there. This one's weirdly stretched out a little bit too long as far as this YouTube video, but it's not terrible. Again, I'm just going to end up tweaking the way things look until either I find a happy medium or I figure out how to do it so it always looks right. But yeah, the live action Minecraft movie has received its first trailer. It is weird, to say the least. It definitely feels like it's just Jack Black in yet another kids movie, basically doing Jumanji again, because there are real world things. We're not going to watch the whole trailer, but I do want to just kind of highlight what it seems like on the trailer. Now, I really just question, is it going to load at all? I really question though whether, do we have any screenshots down here where we could see anything? No. So yeah, the Minecraft elements look like stop motion animated, and I'm gonna have to just mention it as far as this blurry thing, but these humans, including Jack Black, are just humans in the world, not really trying to look Minecrafty in any way. It seems like the idea is that they would have come through a portal. Seems like you're going to be fighting piglins quite a bit. Seems like there might be some sight gags of crafting, but you probably won't do a ton of crafting. I think it is very much just going to be humans come to Minecraft in this comedy, in a survival element. Even the humans here think Jack Black is ridiculous and annoying and lame, so yeah. Having looked at the trailer, I really just question whether there is going to be a lot of kids who are fans of Minecraft, which is going to be your target audience, really liking this movie, or if they haven't already from this trailer just completely missed the mark. Which, in fairness, a Minecraft movie is much like a Lego movie in that it's going to be very difficult to make something that makes sense overall. And yeah, when you look at the Lego movies in general, as far as you've created characters like Emmett and Wildstyle and Batman and Gandalf, and you've made a movie about humans using their imagination to make a movie as far as the Lego movie. Yeah, that is, and that was an amazing amount of success for what they pulled off there. Effectively, the Lego movie could have just been a movie. It could have been a live action movie, really. You could have told the same story with slight changes. Whereas, not sure Warner Brothers is going to be able to succeed on this one. I think a big problem with that is the art style in general. That it's just not going to feel like the Lego games, because it's not going to look like the Lego games. Yeah. Now, I just don't know why you really would have done that overall. Yeah. Let's see. We'll give it a second chance here and just reload the page. See if that does anything for us. Yeah. That may have done something. Nope. Oh, my ad blockers is probably blocking it from loading. Well, whatever. It's supposed to be released in April 2025, and I just, yeah, overall question whether that's the right way to go. For looking at that trailer, had I been the producer in there, I would have said, why are we doing this animation style that looks nothing like the Lego games when we I mean like the Minecraft games, when we could literally have just had the game take place in Minecraft and green screened humans into that world. Like it seems crazy. And it just screams, if you're visually, your Minecraft movie doesn't look like Minecraft, that probably means the people making it don't know anything or care anything about Minecraft. And I definitely suspect Jack Black and Jason Momoa don't really care about Minecraft. And particularly, I think you're going to run into a lot of OCD, autistic type kids who are super into Minecraft, super unhappy with the movie. And they may very well come out of the woodwork. Moving on, Ubisoft's share price has fallen to a nearly 10-year low since the release of Star Wars Outlaws. Analysts say the game hasn't sold as well as expected at launch. I don't know why expectations were so high, although that is seemingly the default these days for every game and every company. Overall, I've heard reviewers say that, well, Star Wars Outlaws isn't a amazingly good game, that it is a nice middle of the road good game that you should play. And maybe that's the thing, is it's just not so overhyped that people didn't pre-order it and didn't play it day one. But over a longer period of time, I think people will come to enjoy Star Wars Outlaws if they're given enough time. And see, this is an example of a headline that's super long, so I could theoretically try and shrink the font here, but in this case, I think you pretty much should just expect it to wrap, because the font would just get really, really small otherwise. Prototype of a cancelled PS2 game called The Last Job has been made available for download. The action game was 40% complete when Acclaim went bankrupt, which 40%, I imagine you should think of that as 40% of a pool being filled, not 40% of a glass being filled. In the sense that if a pool that was 10 feet deep was filled with only 4 feet of water, you're not going to have much fun, and very possibly, even if you were to get into that pool, you may not be able to get out of it. You definitely aren't diving into that pool. Whereas if a glass was 40% full, well, you could have a good decent few swigs of the glass. This is a terrible analogy that really doesn't mean anything. My point being here is that you're not going to have 40% of the levels completely polished and looking good in a prototype like this. You're going to have a game where 40% of the, and this is just an estimate, I'm sure, 40% of the gameplay mechanics are done. Running, shooting, jumping, 40% of the textures on the walls might be done. The rest may be non-existent or extremely buggy. And so, while scientifically it might be interesting to see this game, it really is just a game that is in a very large bucket of other games that aren't really relevant and not really worth playing. The only difference between this game is that, unlike thousands of other canceled games, is you can actually see the prototype here. And in video games, you don't know if a prototype might very well be a vertical slice where there's just more finished than you would actually expect. You can see these giant bullet holes. So yeah, I wouldn't really consider this worth your time to actually play. It didn't lead to anything, didn't come from anything. There would be a lot more relevancy if The Last Job was connected to some other series or some other item or some other like character. If this was James Bond The Last Job, for instance, then it would have much more relevance. If this was Painkiller or The Last Job or something like that. A Destiny mobile game, quote, could get announced soon, it's been claimed. The game which Yeti is said to be involved with was first reported 2 years ago. This is coming from, in part, just Jeff Grubb, so take it with a bit of caution, because I don't feel like Jeff Grubb particularly is very good at his rumor milling, or accurate with his rumor milling. But overall, let's just get to the main point here. Destiny is a game that has succeeded fairly well in its past, but it is on its last legs, and I just don't see a Destiny 3 or mobile game bringing back a significant number of Destiny players. It may be a case that Destiny players have nowhere else to go. Plenty of other games have tried to catch the attention of Destiny players, and I imagine that has chiseled off a lot of the fan base. But overall, I think we may just see either Destiny players sticking with Destiny 2 if they can, or moving on to completely different types of games. If you played all of Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, you've probably been playing those type of games for a very long time at this point. But yeah, I just don't see how a mobile game helps that too much. Although the loot collection loop of Destiny might work fairly well with easier access that a mobile game might give you. I just don't see people playing on their phones a action loot shooter game like Destiny, unless it's a completely different game that just has Destiny on the name of it, which even in that, I just don't think the Destiny universe is that interesting. As somebody who still doesn't even know what the whole story is. The PlayStation 2 is the first console to be added to Japan's Future Technology Heritage Registry. This list acknowledges Japanese items that had a significant impact on culture. The PlayStation 2 certainly did have a significant impact on the Japanese culture and culture in general around the world, being the first DVD player that many people had and got, and it's why the PlayStation 2 sold so well. And see, Sony inherently did not learn that lesson particularly well, in that they had major success by combining two useful items, a game console and a DVD player, and then PlayStation 3 combines Blu-ray and a console, but then the console's a little bit weird with the cell processor in the PS3, and Blu-ray was not cheap enough that you could get a PS3 just as a Blu-ray player on day one compared to just buying a regular standalone Blu-ray player. And then the PS4 and 5 really don't have much to say there. They're not selling the PS4 and 5s by any kind of UK UHD, not UK, but UHD 4K playback capabilities. It is interesting, certainly, that the PlayStation 1 is getting skipped on this and ignored. And I doubt we'll just see other PlayStations just being added. But I do suspect we will only see Japanese gadgets added to this Japanese registry. Other things they equipped, and it is odd comparisons, is a Seiko Chariot Quartz watch, a MIDI-equipped synthesizers, the Opus 8 computer sewing machine, and Trini light emitting element used in Jumbotrons, which is not something I think anybody would have even heard of. So there's quite a few random gadgets. And almost certainly I don't suspect you'll ever see any games on this list. Let's see. The next story here is Black Myth Wukong delay is not due to platform limitations raised to Xbox. It's recently been claimed or rumored that the PlayStation has struck a console exclusivity deal for the game. But yeah, but the rumor I'd been mostly hearing is that they have either been having trouble either communicating with Microsoft as far as getting the game approved through bug testing, which, yeah, there have been rumors of that in the past, that it's just difficult to communicate with Microsoft and get approved with bug testing, whereas PlayStation has been more lenient, and PlayStation games haven't been inherently way more buggy than Xbox has. This may very well be a chicken and the egg situation, though, too, where they are just claiming it's more difficult to release the Xbox version when they really aren't trying. Yeah, I could see game developers in particular just trying to appease their audience and say that they are working on an Xbox version when they are not actually working on one at all, going years saying we're making an Xbox version, really, and then at the last second going, oh, it's all Microsoft's fault, we couldn't get approved, we're canceling that version. And I can see how programmers could even trick themselves into actually believing that, because it probably is fairly easy to make a Xbox version file and start making a game that is just a branch, a slightly different version from the PC or PlayStation version. And then once they actually start looking at the bug testing parts and actually focusing on the Xbox version, realizing that it's just not that easy. This is an example, though, where the font probably does need to come down a little bit, because this is cutting off the picture, and certainly would make some sense. Really, the picture needs to come down a bit smaller. That's what I actually need to tweak. Good Old Games has launched its latest PC game giveaway. Well-received musical adventure game Once Upon a Jester is free to claim until September 5th. my macros also getting incredibly bad. The anti-duplicate tab plugin I had wasn't working. I installed a different one. It wasn't turned on. But yeah, left to its own devices, I'm getting like 2 or 3 tabs opened on this old macro, and I just don't know why it's getting worse and making so many duplicate tabs open, particularly of the news stories. There's just no reason why that should be happening at all. But yeah, I need to work on the new macro, but I am also have opened the door to distract myself from doing that. I'm just getting further and further away from actually accomplishing things that need to be accomplished. It's very ADD in the way I'm moving. But yeah, I need to get the new macros going. I need to do the fall list cleanup. Furniture assembly is going to stop happening eventually. But yeah, I am into a whole massive spring cleaning project that really is only going to eventually resolve into another massive spring cleaning project of moving furniture around, which, yeah, it's not going to actually resolve into anything that helpful anyways. I'll have a slightly better organized house, and that'll be it. And then more junk, I imagine, will get added to the house, and it will get dirty again and disorganized again. Back to video game news, though. We've already taken an hour, and we haven't even gotten through the Video Games Chronicle headlines. A lot of news today, I guess. The Until Dawn remake studio has announced significant layoffs. Ballistic Moons remains focused on supporting the launch of the PS5 and PC game, but I think you can pretty much guess that they are going to struggle to do that if they're doing significant layoffs, and the whole place, the whole game company may be a skeleton crew by the time it actually launches. Sony has decided to take Concord offline, ceasing sales and offering refunds, which this might have been the biggest news, but how can you really even call it the biggest news of the day when it's estimated that barely 25,000 people even bought Concord? Apparently, from what I heard, Concord was in development for 8 years, and they are saying that they're going to try and bring it back in some other way. This may be an example, and you're in this very weird position where, since there isn't a Jim Ryan figurehead that's in charge of Sony Interactive Entertainment now, instead there's 2 people in charge of 2 parts of Sony Interactive Entertainment. I don't know who to really blame here for this one. My guess is you probably will see the blame thrown on Jim Ryan if it has been a game that was developed in 8 years, over the course of 8 years, and in fairness, it always would have been the blame of Jim Ryan, and so this might be good CEOing from one of the 2 CEO people, in that they have shoveled out a game that was never going to actually succeed, let it come out and then fail so they can have a big tax rate write-off loss and just blame it all on Jim Ryan, instead of having an albatross of a project sucking up their budget each quarter in the hopes that it might actually succeed. Particularly in the case of Concord, since nobody was really hyped about Concord or even knew about Concord even a few months ago. So yeah, shoveling it out, letting it fail, offering refunds might have been the smartest move. Or you can take the exact opposite thought and say, maybe this is terrible CEOing from one of the CEOs, in that they forced this game to release way too early, even though theoretically, or it's rumored that it's been in development for 8 years, and they didn't support it, and they didn't put enough publishing dollars behind it, which they definitely didn't put in enough publishing dollars behind it to to make it even be a known name. So yeah, you could certainly believe the other way too. 3 points make a line effectively, and so now we have 1 point. As far as we kind of know that the new people in charge of Sony and PlayStation in particular, have done this. We need to see if we can find, or if we will see in the future, 2 more points to see if this is just a trend on how they're going to plan on shoveling out games. And it might be, like, the PS5 Pro feels like an odd thing that's being pushed out without a lot of promotion, and we may very well just boil this down to a lack of publishers putting money into promoting things. But yeah, we still would need that 3rd point. After Concord had been released, though, canceling it and offering refunds is probably about the best you could do. You could keep it going, but it probably is costing them more to keep servers up and than they're getting from the people playing it. Do I think Concord would ever be re-released in a good game? Probably not. You maybe could reskin it, but I don't think the gameplay is being well received either, or was well received either. So I don't think just reskinning it fixes the problem with it. Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection and Capcom Fighting Collection 2 are now coming to Xbox also. Let's see, both fighting game collections will arrive on Xbox One next year. I did hear that there's potentially a little bit of censorship thought to happen in one of these Capcom fighting games. I think Capcom Fighting Collection 2, because in one of these games, I think it might have been Capcom vs. SNK 2, there's a move where one of the vampire characters can transform in kind of like a Babe-Alley type end animation. You can transform a lot of the characters into a different outfit, and some of the outfits showed some skin, some of the outfits went a little Lolita on some of the younger looking characters. And so there may just be, in 2024's standards of censorship, some changes that are happened, or that those transformations may be removed completely. So you may not be getting a one-to-one translation. We probably should wait until the game actually comes out to see if that's the case. This may just be pure speculation on my part. Although, in fairness, it's not getting talked about much. I actually haven't seen Censored Gaming tweet anything in a fairly long time, or make a YouTube video in a fairly long time, so hopefully he's doing alright. But I mean, so many terrible things kept happening to him that either he was grifting and he's finally given up the grift, or something terrible has happened to him and he's actually just not able to make content anymore. There also hasn't been a ton of censorship news until today, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see 1 or 2 videos from him fairly quickly. Let's see. Inotria, the Last Song studio, says that the Xbox version is indefinitely delayed due to the lack of communication. Oh, so maybe this was the story I was thinking about that I thought was the Black Myth Wukong story, but yeah, I think I've confused this story. The developer claims it's stuck at the submission process and says Xbox isn't replying. Which, yeah, I've heard that from other developers over the years. So that's... that it does feel like there's just like a lot of red tape nonsense. More red tape nonsense happening when you try to release a Xbox game. A game on Xbox than PlayStation. Arguably, releasing on the Nintendo eShop is too easy, though, and releasing on Steam is just a free-for-all. Way too easy. But yeah, this is also a headline that is way too long, so I'm looking for the biggest examples of the font being too big. I'll work with the biggest examples, and it should fix all the middle examples automatically. September's PlayStation Plus Essential games are now available. Harry Potter Quidditch Champions, MLB The Show 24, and Little Nightmares 2. On Steam, Harry Potter Quidditch Champions is mixed reviewed, I noticed, and that is kind of a shame. It does seem like there's far too many Harry Potter projects that get made and just get made in a poor quality. Warner Bros. Would be very wise to have a much tighter control on who they license Harry Potter to and making good Harry Potter games. But also, maybe they are working on a different strategy that might make a lot of sense, is to just make as much money through licensing fees as possible and ruin the Harry Potter universe in favor of something else. Which, yeah, if I was Warner Brothers, I would say, let's hire some writers to write us some movie scripts of a Harry Potter ripoff. Like, just straight up, I guess legally you can't say Harry Potter ripoff, but say, we want a magical fantasy movie series that we can turn into things. Actually, you wouldn't even have to hire writers. There's plenty of magical fantasy storybooks. You would simply buy the rights to any of these pre-written books that very possibly would have come out before Harry Potter and the very first Harry Potter book ever came out, and you would just continue to do that. I wouldn't say do anything big like the Chronicles of Narnia. They've tried that multiple times and failed. Percy Jackson has a whole new Percy Jackson and the Olympians on Disney Plus. So I think that's a whole reboot of doing the Percy Jackson movies a second time. If not, maybe a third time. But yeah. There is almost certainly some series you can find there. You could I think there's one called The Good Witch, as far as book series, or The Bad Witch, something like that. Warner Brothers, I think, owns the Wizard of Oz movies, so yeah, and I know they're releasing a new Wicked movie based on, in part, I think, the Wicked musical. But yeah, you could certainly do something like that too. But yeah, if I was Warner Bros., I'd say let's take from the director of Harry Potter, or let's make Daniel Radcliffe the executive producer of a new project, and say, hey, let the rumors spread that this is the new Harry Potter, this is what kids should be into, this should be really popular, and get away from J.K. Rowling and all the controversy around that. They should have done that years ago. They should be doing anything, just trying to have any IP that they can actually make movies on, instead of the Minecraft movie. Although if the Minecraft movie is where Warner Brothers' mind is at, yeah, any other movie is probably going to be very similar to whatever the Minecraft movie is going to be, whether that's good or bad. Moving on, the new Xbox Game Pass titles for console, PC, and cloud have been revealed. They include Age of Mythology Retold, Expeditions, a Med Runner game, and Riders Republic. Oh, here's some examples of some colors changes I still need to make. I wonder if that means the previous article also needed some tweaks. So speaking of censorship, Lollipop Chainsaw's repop producer has listed the changes made to the original mode and then says it hasn't been censored, which for artistic purists, then any change is going to be under the category of something that they don't want. I don't think artistic purists are going to inherently say it's censorship, but at a certain level they might make that argument because you are making it so that in this new form I cannot experience the original game as it originally was created and released. I don't know how you don't call that censorship in a very broad term of what censorship means. Sure, it's not government censorship, and maybe it's not even censorship to remove content that might be objectionable, but it's still preventing the end user from experiencing the original experience. In the same way that Star Wars remakes, maybe not so much censorship in the sense that they were trying to change things because it was objectionable, but they were still preventing the end fandom from experiencing movies in a better quality without any changes. I saw a YouTube video, also speaking of better quality, talking about how things like True Lies and the Terminator movies have so much film grain on them because they were shot at like 16mm instead of 32mm, something like that, that blowing it up to 4K is just kind of impossible to do. Now, theoretically, I guess if they had a whole bunch of copies, master copies, the film grain would be different between at least 3 different copies. So if you scan 3 different master copies, you could probably get around the film grain and get what the actual intention was there. Or maybe those wouldn't be 3 master copies, maybe those would be 3 first generation copies. But yeah, there might very well just be a lot of grain on the original master copies in the sense that it was just there as soon as the film was exposed to the light. So to fix that for the 4K versions of particularly True Lies and Terminator, they put a lot of AI run generated film cleanup on it, where the AI is actually generating the pixels and just making everything look a little bit more computer-y and CGI in some spots. And I bring this up to make a point here, as I'm thinking myself of getting 4K versions of a lot of movies. It might not be worth it in some cases to get the 4K version of a video, because if you have a Blu-ray of the version and the Blu-ray is already known to be a pretty good version, and then the 4K version has AI modifications, censorship of some sort to it, getting back to censorship, having a Blu-ray and then an upscaling 4K player that will just upscale the image and maybe make it a little bit blocky, but won't try to apply any kind of smoothing or anti-aliasing or AI image generation to it, might be way better than the other case. Now, that is going to be in the rare cases. In many cases, if it was a digitally shot movie, it being in 4K will be better. If it was shot in a high dynamic range or scanned in a high dynamic range, having deeper blacks and brighter whites and just more of a range as far as the color gamut overall, then a UHD definitely would be the better pick. And that's usually going to be the case. But unfortunately, it's just not as easy as you should always buy the 4K versions. Although a lot of times you should always buy the 4K versions because you get the Blu-ray versions anyways. You get both discs. They are definitely repackaging a lot of unsold Blu-rays into 4K packages as disc media is dying, which is funny because a Japanese, I believe, I think it might have been actually a Chinese lab, is in early production of what I think was somewhere around 130 terabytes of spinning plastic disk storage, which is a lot of storage. You're talking, as far as a 2-hour video, I imagine you would have to be 8 or 16K on the video quality for it to be that necessary to be that big. So yeah, I doubt we'll see movies in a even higher density. Games, very possibly. That would make sense depending on the speed when this technology actually gets here, if it actually gets here. Storage for servers is about the one place where that does make sense, and that's assuming you can actually burn a disk and it takes a reasonable amount of time and you're not just spinning a piece of plastic for hours or days to burn the 130 terabytes of storage to it, and you aren't spinning the disk for days to restore from it, which you might be because the connection speeds may just be too slow there. So it's nice that we're moving forward there, because right now we are really at this plateau where there's one very expensive tape backup drive that you can use in servers to back up storage, and that's about it. And it's slow and it's expensive. The tapes are expensive, the drive is expensive, and it's questionable whether any of these technologies actually survive anywhere as long as they promise to survive. Bit rot being a problem that might exist for a lot of DVDs, CDRs, Blu-rays, 4K UHD discs. All of them might die after 20 or 30 years and just not be readable. Anyways, let's get back to video games. I keep getting sidetracked talking about things. In part, this is definitely because I'm not making video game footage. If I was spending most of my days making footage, I would have less YouTube videos that I've watched. I'm also watching The League on Hulu, which I recommend if you like adult humor, and I don't if you don't. Let's see what the actual changes are. The original mode is a mode that reproduces the same core expression, cutscene direction, character design, motion, comic style character, introduction scenes, costumes, achievements, etc. as the original game. For the original mode, we applied for approval. There were no requests for revisions from any of the platform holders. This is, I have explained before. So the actual changes, certain parameters have been adjusted to make it feel more like a modern action game. So now inherently, it is unfortunately just the case that if you want the original version of any game, you should just buy and play the original version of that game, because there's always going to be some kind of change and tweak. Whereas books can be one-for-one reprinted without any real problems. Music can be one-for-one reprinted without any problems. Film, for the most part, can be one-for-one reprinted. But video games have to run on modern platforms, so they do need some changes under the foundation there. But then they also are trying to compete in a modern world where gaming is ever evolving, where books don't really evolve that much. Music is still sound. It may get new styles all the time. Movies may be better technology, but it's still just sound and visuals. So, attack power, movement speed, camera movement range. So camera movement range very possibly might be censorship, or claim to be censorship, if in the past you could look up the skirt of Juliet, who was barely 18 in the game. I wouldn't be surprised if they've limited the camera so it can't move that way. But it also might very well be a case that the camera just could only go so far to the left and the right on the screen, and now they've stretched the screen out more, so going left and right more makes sense. Combo input acceptance time and initial combo skills. So people who really liked the way the game played before are going to not be happy with those changes. Other changes include a number of remaining shots in the blaster, changes to the behavior of Nikkei's special moves. Maybe this is an anti-seizure thing. Maybe this is a censorship thing. In addition, an option to automate QTEs. Well, again, that a lot of people will be happy with it. The change of the ranking mode to a time attack. It plays through all stages, changes to the lineup of items in the shop, price adjustments, and the addition of a chain attack system, image quality resolution, frames per second, and the addition of Yukari Tamura's voice. Yep. Which the addition of a new voice also very much could be argued as a censorship thing, but maybe it's a toggle you can turn on or turn off. The thing that's weird about this, and I think that he's trying to be as honest, I think, as he can be while still selling a game, and he is definitely getting a lot of pushback from fans who don't want anything changed at all and just wanted the graphics to be better, and that's it. Maybe the audio to be better, and that's it. But yeah, he is very much being stretched between the original fandom, who have a very possibly unrealistic sentimental attachment to the original game, and trying to sell to a new audience, which we need a new audience if we're going to get more lewd, jokey type games like Lollipop Chainsaw to be made. But I think his biggest problem here is that they're calling it original mode, which definitely is probably the wrong label, and maybe they'd be best just to call it 2024 mode and then have a hyper mode, which is, I assume, the contrast is that there's going to be some kind of hardcore extra mode that changes a lot more. And really at this point I think the producer is probably be best to just stop responding. He doesn't respond a ton, but he's probably responding a little too much, and he's certainly getting asked the censorship questions. These are very possibly the questions that he also has a personal enthusiasm for and is pushing internally to make sure they don't change. It's been a long time, certainly, since we've had these kinds of immature style games that are more cheesy and just cheesecakes in their design. Whereas nowadays, if you're getting an immature game being made, it is being done in a far too serious fashion most of the time. You have Baldur's Gate 3 is kind of a great example of that, where you are just able to have adult scenes and nudity, but it is taken more seriously than it should be. And yeah, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer inspired action in the trauma-like movies inspirations are just kind of gone. The cheesecakes, the Porky's type movies, we see that also in movies too, is that you just don't get trash being made. And if the movie industry in particular is going to survive, I think you probably would do well to see more trashy movies, low budget movies, cheaper movies coming to theaters, and not have every single movie try to be the next Avengers movie. But yeah, I just don't think there's a taste for that stuff. Yeah, I seriously doubt you would have anybody try to make something like a movie like Lollipop Chainsaw, which honestly would work pretty nicely as a movie. And you're not even seeing it in streaming, which that's kind of ridiculous. It's how censored and well, that's not censored, obviously. But yeah, just how censored the streaming services often are, as far as lewdness in particular. I definitely do worry about future generations, as they seem to be falling directly into being more frigid or conservative in what they're willing to watch. Although inherently also there's been a lot of movies where they would have a dumb sex scene at the beginning for no good reason, whereas Lollipop Chainsaw is the kind of experience where it's the whole point. But yeah, notice all this trailer went out of their way to not show any upskirt shots, and in this case she's wearing a cheerleader outfit, so any underskirt she's wearing is just going to be assumedly an underskirt and not actual underwear. Moving on, ID at Xbox interview. The discoverability is the biggest challenge for games today. This font obviously is way too big. A senior director, Chris Charla, discusses how far Xbox's indie program has come and where it still has to come. Notice how this is also centered in this case. So this is a whole interview from Video Games Chronicle, which that is the last Video Games Chronicle headline we had. Wow, it's been an hour and a half just to get to that point. Moonless Moon is coming to the Switch on September 19th. It's a text-based adventure currently available for PC. I don't know why they're calling it a text-based adventure when it looks like a visual novel to me, but maybe there is a slight difference there. Maybe it's even more simplistic than a visual novel. There's another thing, as I'm doing follow list cleanup, is just I'm really having to have a come to Jesus moment as far as just how many of these visual novels do I really even need to put on the wish list. Yeah, it is more a nieces and nephews thing, and I imagine any of my nieces and nephews aren't actually going to get into visual novels. It'd be a great way to trick them into reading, but also what they're reading is probably not going to be super appropriate for the ages that they are. I would say 16, 17, 18, getting girls or boys, whatever, reading visual novels would be interesting, certainly. It helps them read more, but they mostly would be reading romance or of some level. Yeah, romance of some level, whether it's simplistic romance or more hardcore romance. By hardcore, I mean in that case actual dating and perhaps references to intercourse, not hardcore in the sense that it's showing lower genitalia. That's the wrong phrase to use, really. I should have said puppy love type romances versus high school, college dating romances. You can see that Moonless Moon here is being very positively received. It does just kind of seem to me, well, first of all, it seems like it's not in English, but I guess it is. looking at the screenshots. It seems to me though that maybe there's just a little bit of text that you maybe can click on, and that's about it as far as the interactivity, that you don't actually select. Yeah, this may be it. It's just you get a prompt here and a prompt here, and that's it. You don't actually select specific options. Dros is coming to Xbox One and Series on September 19th. It's currently available for the Switch and PC. Yep. This one has been out since 2023. Also, while I'm doing follow-list cleanup, I'm just trying to get rid of anything that's been out for more than 30 days that doesn't have 30 reviews. 30 reviews in 30 days may be a really tight requirement, and I could see myself expanding that to 30 reviews in 90 days, which seems more reasonable. But if in 2024, if this year isn't getting your game any attention, you're never going to have a better opportunity. There's been no competition really as far as AAA games coming out. So if you're putting out a AA game, a single game, an indie game on Steam, and it's not getting people to play it and review it, nobody's ever going to play it or review it. A whodunit detective adventure game called Mind Cop launches for Q4 for PS5, Switch, and PC. Here we can see it. Let's see. Mortal Kombat 1 expansion Chaos Reigns DLC character sector gameplay trailer. I saw some pushback on this DLC in that it is inherently gender swapping two of the characters from previous Mortal Kombat games, and not really giving them a good reason to be gender swapped or giving them new characters, which in the case of the robot characters you probably could. The bar is pretty low, I imagine, to write an interesting story for the robot characters if you're going to gender swap them, although inherently you just kind of don't need to. And you run also into a problem. I'll throw in yet another issue, in that you have a strong black female with cornrows coming out of the back of her helmet, and you're keeping her armored up and covered up for the majority of the time. So, yeah. Very Iron Man fatality there. I guess they didn't want to do the same gimmick and just say, well, this is Sector's daughter, and try and introduce a Sector 2 or something like that. I don't know what you do with Mortal Kombat. It's just been beaten into the ground with so many bad ideas. I think you probably go back and start over from the beginning. And they tried to do that, but there's just, I think, bad leadership with bad ideas, and it may very well be Ed Boon is at fault, and they need to just have him retire. But yeah, my thought as far as what you would do with Mortal Kombat: live action video, start over again. We're gonna have a smaller number of characters. We're gonna do full-on live action video, and it is going to look extremely bloody and extremely brutal, to the point where it is just going to be approaching actual legal definitions of obscenity. As far as this is going to be Faces of Death style footage in the video game. It's not going to be cartoony, it's not going to be shiny, it's not going to have a bright color palette. That would be what I would do with Mortal Kombat. You're going to have to sell on the controversy, because that's the only thing that ever sold those games in the first place. either that or you go, we're going to make great gameplay, we're going to get into esports. That's another direction you can go. But if you're going to do that, you probably at that point have to get away from the fatalities and the brutality, and it's not going to feel like Mortal Kombat at all. And that's what they were trying to do with the Injustice games, and didn't get anywhere with that either. The best thing they could probably do is maybe just stay the course and get rid of microtransactions and the greediness of Mortal Kombat. That would certainly help too. Yeah. Here we can see we're at 71% positive of Mortal Kombat 1, but in the last 30 days we are mixed with only 56% positive. There is also certainly room for complaints in that more and more of the female characters are getting covered up completely, and so the sexiness, the lewdness that was also a part of Mortal Kombat has been neutered. That is certainly some complaints I've heard, and it's obviously true. And yeah, I don't think I'd go too much further in that direction, but I would show skin. And it's not crazy for fighters to show skin, both male and female, really. Particularly in a fighting game where they're taking so much damage. Yeah, you look at the screenshots here, and there's basically one screenshot with female characters that are recognizable as female characters that aren't covered up. Just that one screenshot, and that's it, out of what feels like 10 or 20 of them. No Man's Sky Aquarius is now available. You can go fishing. Apparently there's also a long list of other things that have been changed. Guess I can make a YouTube short on it. These gestures I tried to set up are not working particularly well. And I probably need easier gestures than diagonal. Moving the mouse diagonally, perfectly diagonally, is way harder than moving it horizontally or vertically perfectly. Let's see, the Minecraft movie premieres April 4th, 2025. Let's see if we can see if this will play. So it almost feels like it's during the GameDeveloper.com. So yeah, you have these 4 characters walking through a portal, and yeah, Jason Momoa dressed in this weird pink jacket, and then you just have a lot of piglins, a lot of blocky wolves, a little bit of crafting, and punching a tree, creeper. And then you have Jack Black playing Steve. And so they go, "Who are you?" And he goes, "I am Steve." And that's it. Which is funny because you'd think it would be Alex. But obviously, and she's basically calling him a pain. So it definitely feels like humans will just be trapped in a Minecraft world that doesn't even look good. Yeah, it's just this weird stop motion claymation animation that just does not feel like what you could make Minecraft look like. Like, seems totally visually the wrong direction. So much so, I imagine people might be complaining about the visuals for much longer than they're even complaining about the story, which is probably going to be fairly non-existent, since there really isn't that much of a story. Yeah. I guess you probably are going to see a dragon fight at the very end. That's the only thing that would really make a lot of sense. Or at least a tease to a dragon fight. And you'll probably see them build very little in the game. It very much is probably going to be survival style gameplay. Let's see. Bulwark's Falconeer Chronicles becomes Bulwark Evolution Falconeer Chronicles. Seems like a very small change to the title, probably for some copyright reasons or trademark reasons. Yeah, I really don't know how any company can manage to make anything successful for all of the crazy copyright trademark danger that exists. Since this is very positive and it's not in early access, I'm just going to go ahead and put it on my wish list. Marisa of Lyretop Mountain has been delayed to 2025. I'm not sure I've ever even heard of this game before. Looks like it might be an interesting thing if that was actually the game. Based on the Toho project. Tabletop stuff. Is Toho some kind of tabletop game? I don't think it is, but maybe it is. Maybe that's where all these Toho games come from and why they're always so different looking. Here we have yet another one that's just not going to load. I'll forget that. Now this definitely feels like it has a tabletop inspiration to it, but none of the other Toho games have. The Famitsu review scores for issue 1864 are available, giving Gundam Breakers 4 a 31 out of 40. And then the Hokkaido serial murder case, the Okosh disappearance, Mysteries in Ice Tearful Figurine, that's a long headline there, name, getting 32 out of 40. Then we have an even longer Japanese title here, getting 32 out of 40. Not a lot of games this week, which is not surprising. There's just not a lot of games coming out. Although that's interesting because I don't think I've seen Black Myth Wukong being reviewed by Famitsu yet, and I'm not sure I've seen it actually being released in Japan, so we should keep an eye out for that, but I may have also missed it. It may have been last week's review. A 1950s courier action game, Deliver at All Cost, has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Which, yeah, there's possibly something there of interest. So I'll throw that direction. Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake details parties, vocations, and monster arenas. Someone's knocking on my door, but I imagine it's just a package. So, hoping that that's all it needs to be. Yep. Yeah, I'm trying to avoid being interrupted here, and inherently I'm going to be interrupted here. Yeah. And we've gone so long. Here's an example of where I may have potentially blown up the images. Nope, that's not even me. That's just Gematsu blowing up these images way too large. And that's super blurry. Leave it at that then, and not bother to look at them. Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake. Another game I can make a YouTube short on it. Square Enix has its Tokyo Game Show 2024 lineup and schedule on Gematsu if you want to check that out. Let's see. Doesn't seem like they're gonna announce any surprises yet, or They're not hinting at any surprises at all, really. Persona 3 Reload Expansion Pass Wave 3 Episode Aegis, The Answer opening movie is now available. Come on, page. Doesn't want to close. Persona 3 Reload, overwhelmingly positive. The expansion pass. No. I saw I don't know if it was a joke YouTube video or not, where some Japanese person was saying, "Don't be fooled. A Japanese high school is nothing like Persona." Or I was fooled. I thought it was going to be exactly like Persona, which, yeah, no, obviously it's not going to be like Persona. Might be somewhat similar, but probably not that similar at all. The same is true in the West. Like almost every depiction in any form of art of high school, it's not anywhere close to what people's actual high school experience is. A fast-paced action platformer called Core Breaker is going to be published by Astrolabe Games. Okay, well, guess leave it at that. More of these. That brings us to GameDeveloper.com news. Let's see how many of this. So GameDeveloper.com has a update here saying Until Dawn remake developer Ballistic Moon confirms layoff. The UK studio has spent years working on a rebuilt and enhanced version of the horror title. I'm not sure you really need to spend years making a rebuilt and enhanced version of the game, but maybe you do because it was a PS3 game, and maybe this is one of the last few games that were made for the PS3 that needed and would ever get good ports to PC or PS5. But even that doesn't seem like they're really succeeding particularly well. It is an interesting question, certainly, as somebody who didn't play Until Dawn and knows very little about it. Will this game have the same impact if I was to buy it on PC and try and cover it? Or would it not impact me as much? And in part, the question is, would it impact the viewers as much? Probably not, but yeah, I imagine a lot of people missed Until Dawn and didn't play it. It's also a horror game, so its audience is going to be fairly limited in the first place. And you certainly aren't in the situation where you're up to something like Silent Hill 2, which has a very strong niche fandom, but also has a large player base of potential players who have never played it before, since that game is so old. And I do have concern, though, that in the case of Silent Hill 2, people are going to try and play it, get bored, and quit. Zynga has sold its Web3 game Sugartown to D20 Labs. D20 Labs is made up of former Web3 staff, plans to develop Sugartown and other projects into the future of rewarded play. Notice how this is a very long headline, but it wraps around fine, and there's still plenty of buffer here. Sometimes I can put a buffer on some websites, but sometimes I can't figure out how to put a buffer on it. They've made their website slightly different. This font size, though, is kind of questionable as far as the main header. Here's more on that story. JAMA Games and other devs claim Microsoft doesn't care about their Xbox ports. More third-party studios are speaking up about difficulties making and porting their games for Xbox dual current-gen consoles. In part, some of this may very well just be whiners, or it might be an effort to pressure Microsoft to drop demands that the Xbox Series S be supported, and that they would just prefer to put out ports that only worked on the Series X, which the Series S and the Series X are fairly different consoles as far as hardware wise. But yeah, I think Microsoft is just a giant company that's too big to be run efficiently, and is definitely not being run efficiently. It could be run more efficiently, I think, than it is right now, but it's just too big of a business, and arguably most businesses are too big of businesses and should be broken up, forced by government interference and legislation to be smaller corporations, less efficient in the terms of the way business uses it, but more efficient in the real definition of the word efficiency, in that you would have a boss who could actually have, in his 40 hours of a week that he spends, if he even works 40 hours a week, enough time to know what's going on in their company and make sure everything is proceeding smoothly in that company. When you look at Phil Spencer at Xbox, he seems to have a lot of time to do interviews, and is probably not taking anywhere as many meetings with as many people as he should, and he's almost certainly not coming face to face or communicating with mid-level and lower level employees at all in his entire working experience. Let's see. Moving on, Rocksteady has cut staff following Suicide Squad's underperformance. The layoffs largely hit their Q&A team, which sources said will negatively affect the developers' product quality, which Suicide Squad was already not particularly a good quality experience, so my suspicion is that this is just going to lead to them eventually abandoning Suicide Squad, and potentially Rocksteady may just be a shell of its company when this is all said and done, or shut down completely. Either way, that's yet another failure on WB's terms, because I think WB owns Rocksteady. Firewalk and Sony have agreed to ground Concord, although I imagine Sony in particular made that call uniquely. Now, this very possibly could lead to a lawsuit, and that Firewalk is now going to sue Sony and say we need to get paid back for the potential profits we could have had with Concord. Although inherently Sony could sue Firewalk and say they did a bad job, and now Sony's, as the publisher, invested money into the development of Concord. In a lot of ways, Firewalk could walk away from the deal and just start developing another game just as well, easier than Sony can. But yeah, there's a lot of grounds here for lawsuits. If they're not all feeling very happy about this decision, which I imagine they can't really be that happy with this decision. Let's see. Tilting Point is making layoffs that could impact 20% of the global workforce. The mobile publisher has spent big in recent years, but now is downsizing in response to a tough market conditions, quote-unquote tough market conditions. Apparently they have several licensings here too. We got M&M's and SpongeBob and Star Trek, and not sure what the rest of these are, but yeah. It is all very much bulge and burst economics in the game industry. Let's bulge out and acquire as many companies and people as possible, then as soon as the bubble even slightly begins to look like it's going to burst, let's lay off a bunch of people and own a bunch of IPs that you then won't have enough people to actually monetize with. And inherently it is building on an assumption, I would assume this is the case, that they can just hire new people at lower paying jobs around the world. There's still plenty of people who want to be game programmers and are willing to be exploited more than your average game developer is willing to be exploited. Yeah, but it is definitely a slippery slope, and we'll just see more and more licenses being handed out to cheap Chinese game developers making terrible low effort mobile games that nobody actually wants to play. And eventually the audience will just dry out, and it can very well just become a death spiral, and that the games get worse, the sales get worse because the games are worse, then the games get worse, and then the sales get worse, and it just keeps going and keeps going. Games will always be around, I think, but there could be a lot fewer of them, and they could be a lot worse in quality. Let's see. Here's a headline from game developer I probably don't agree with. I quote here: "Sleep tight, Hobo Games. Risk of Rain developer goes dark as the staffers join Valve. Studio has canceled the upcoming project codenamed Snail." Even if this is a quote, it's not particularly necessary when this is the actual headline here, and would have fit my sizing better on top of that. Helldivers 2 and Dead Island 2 support studio Toadman Interactive has confirmed layoffs. The layoffs are expected to impact around 100 full-time and contract employees. We had a nice week or two there, maybe even went 3 or 4 weeks, where there were no layoffs. But yeah, seems like it is now back at full force. Yeah. And at this rate, I'm not really even expecting to see a lot of seasonal hiring pop up around the Christmas season for the game industry like you might see in other industries. Dragon's Dogma and Devil May Cry director Hideaki Itsuno has departed Capcom. The veteran director spent over 3 decades at the studio. We talked about this in the last stream, but might as well cover these news stories again. Embracer appoints Thomas Koegler as CEO of Asmodee. A new board of directors has also been formed, which I didn't catch that sub-headlining. That's way bigger news. That means there's just a whole new top C-suite level of people in charge of Asmodee, just completely different people. So it's as much of a different company as you might ever get. Creative's UK latest fund offers up to £25,000 to Northeast teams. New Steam tweaks let devs highlight related games and DLC on store pages. Take that as another example of something that needs some tweaking. And then there's a report that NetEase is cutting jobs at the Ouka studios ahead of a potential closure. And then the Atari CEO wants Infogrames to become the ultimate preservationist publisher. Notice none of these companies are announcing any new games or publishing any new games. And Concord, Sony, was the one company that tried to publish or release a new game in the past couple of weeks, and that didn't go well. Then there's a whole editorial here. How does the game industry survive beyond 2025? And then that brings us to all the new games on Steam. Which, I don't know why these are sleeping. I took off that I took off the extension that was supposed to make things sleep. I probably just need to reboot Firefox. So, yeah. let's try fairly quickly here to go through all the new games on Steam and see which ones look like they might be good enough, or that they're good enough to at least make a YouTube short on it. I haven't really seen a lot of RPG Maker 8-bit style visuals in games lately. Still, I am very much at the point where I wouldn't make any YouTube shorts around it. I'm just outright blacklisting anything that looks like it's an RPG Maker game, even if it technically is not an RPG Maker game. And yeah, I'm gonna probably be a bit crueler on things that look like 8-bit NES style games too. And my level of normal cruelness, as I'm doing a flawless cleanup off screen too. I thought about making footage around it and just making a whole series around that, but frankly I just don't want to talk for hours while looking at games. Plus I'm going through adult games, and I am definitely thinking at this point, with the family sharing, any adult games are probably not worth keeping. Honey Pop 2 will be on my account. I don't own Honey Pop 2, but Honey Pop 1 will be on my account. But yeah, I'm not gonna go out of my way to get really anything else because I can't even play the games. Not for footage, at least. And I don't have free time to play games just to, I mean, I can't even talk about them during live streams. The way YouTube has made itself abundantly clear. Doesn't even want you discussing adult content, so yeah. I'm effectively, as a content creator, being forced to censor myself, which means my content is being censored. I imagine that's how censorship works in a lot of cases, is that you probably have a lot of middlemen and content creators who don't want to be censored or don't care if they're censored. Is this gonna load anything? These pages are like half loaded. Fortunately, looks like they are also all garbage. Spleef is a phrase I haven't heard in a long time. Which Spleef was a Minecraft mod game where you're blowing up the ground under them, or mining the ground under them on a floating platform. This itself does not really look quite like that. Because I'm opening so many tabs to do the flawless cleanup, 300 plus, I imagine I'm also gaining the automated ire of Steam and getting throttled or banned for a few minutes. Hopefully that doesn't lead to major bans. This is weird. It's mostly positive. I could have sworn I saw that this was mixed. Well, I guess I was wrong. Good on them. It's a much better story. It's a shame that 2 hours into the stream I'm now contradicting what I said 10-20 minutes into the stream. But yeah, I don't know what the whole papercraft head thing there is all about, but I personally don't know if Quidditch can actually be that interesting of a game when you're trying to actually turn it into something. Of course, one of the problems that would be solved as far as these pages not loading would be if the duplicate tabs are getting opened. And see, I just don't understand why duplicate tabs are being opened here. It's like the macro is, even though these are the old macros that haven't been changed, like they seem to be doing something different. So something changed, obviously. Here we have yet another clicker. Yet another clicker. Here we have a mixed game, so I can just go ahead and remove that off the post. I don't know why so many of these games are getting open though. Penguin Helper. No. Give this a chance, it's probably nothing. Casting of Frank Stone. I'm gonna leave this. This was the single player Dead by Daylight game. I kept thinking that this was actually connected to the Alan Wake's universe, but it actually isn't. It's a shame it's so mixed reviewed. Let's see if we can find a negative reason as to why it's so reviewed. Let's see, review types, negative. Notice they haven't gotten to the point where, oh, so you have to come over here to display if you want the most helpful, most recent, or funny. Bugs and optimization problems. Bored and confused. Can't play it on different monitors. Like QTs. Meh. Not worth the price tag. It's fine when it's playable. So I would suspect that bugs are the problem. And I don't know why you put out your game that's a spin-off of a highly successful game in that state. That's only going to hurt your branding and any faith people might have put into your game. I also don't know why you'd make a game that is just all bright red screenshots. Explore secret NCIS facility. The Moon 2044. Interesting. I'm not sure how many games actually have NCIS as characters. I would assume that they're a fan of the NCIS TV series and spin-offs. Which inherently the NCIS TV series are just spin-offs of other police procedural dramas. There might be some slight benefit in doing NCIS as the good guys instead of doing police, because the police themselves have gained, whether deserved or not, such a negative following. Whereas a lesser known police force like the NCIS doesn't have that negativity associated with it. Here we see NBA 2K25 mixed. At this point, I think I'm pretty used to expecting that the I'm used to expecting that the sports games are going to be received poorly. This is some kind of prequel to Into Tonight. It looks like a Chinese dating visual novel. I'm gonna say no to it. I haven't seen any real success with any of those Chinese dating visual novel games, or visual novel games in general. Yeah. What is this as far as... What are you supposed to be clicking on as far as the numbers go? I imagine this might be nothing. And the anime girls and the number games just don't feel like they're really connected there well enough. Fantasy Map Simulator. Might be a use for that. If you were trying to do Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, although inherently that doesn't feel like an actual game. Yep. There's still just a ton of garbage that gets released on a daily basis on Steam, and then doing the flawless cleanup is just a whole level of slightly better games that, once I start to really think about them, are still pretty terrible, not things I'd ever actually want to play, with only a tiniest cream of the crop actually making it to the wish list, with only a tiniest cream of that crop actually getting purchased. Alright, well, I'm going to end this stream here, and then I'll look at the rest of the games and show them on Friday. We went too long. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Bye.